Well, good morning and welcome to our Snug Harbor morning reflection. My name is Shane Thompson and I'm one of the chaplains here at Snug Harbor, and I'm glad you're with us this morning. Today we begin looking at step 3, and we're breaking away a little bit from the norm of what we do as we break down step 3 at the beginning by looking at depth into our step 3 prayer. As we open this morning, let's clear our hearts and minds as we open with our serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. So the step 3 prayer is this: God, I offer myself to Thee, to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of Your power, Your love, and Your way of life. Amen. God, I offer myself to You, to build with me and do as You will. And I think about it when I often offer myself to God. What I'm doing is I'm surrendering to that higher power's leadership in my life with regard to my actions, my thoughts, my motives, and my decisions. See, at this point, we've already admitted to our powerlessness. And I also freely admit that it's been my selfish motives and so-called brilliant ideas that have gotten me into trouble in the past, time after time. So now at step 3, I'm inviting God, or that higher power, as we understand, to take the wheel and to lead the way. I'm willing to change the way I do things during the day. I'm willing to try something new. And I'm trusting that God knows what to do better than I do. When I ask my higher power to build with me and to do with me as You will, I'm really making myself vulnerable. I'm offering to be available to my higher power, to allow that higher power to work through me any way they see fit. I'm saying that if my higher power has big plans for me today, that I don't want to miss out on them by running the show myself. But also, if there are big plans for someone else today, and He wants to work through me to bring about those plans, I'm even willing to cooperate on that level too. And if my higher power has a purpose for my life, I want to yield to that higher power so that I can fulfill that purpose. I'm placing myself in that higher power's hands. It's a lot like a potter and the clay. The higher power is the potter and we are the clay. This involves some humility, something we're not always good at. So anyway, basically this first sentence in the third step prayer lets my higher power know that I'm making a conscious choice today to play ball. I'm in the game today. I'm joining up with my higher power as my team captain, my director, my boss. My higher power is in charge, and I'm not. And that's the way I choose to operate this day. I know that my higher power definitely doesn't want me to drink or use today. So therefore, if I offer myself to God or that higher power to build with me and do with me as He would today, there's a good chance I won't use. The next sentence is, relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do your will. You know, in the big book, the word self appears 89 times in our basic texts. 89. Most often it's attached to another word with a hyphen, such as self-reliance, self-knowledge, self-pity, self-evidence, self-centered, self-sacrifice, self-searching, self-control, self-revealing, self-deception, self-discipline, self-confident, self-sufficient, self-imposed, self-destruction, self-propulsion, self-seeking, self-delusion, self-esteem, self-appraisal, self-conscious, self-justification, self-respect, and my all-time favorite, self will run riot. The word selfish appears 16 times and is coupled with other unpleasantly descriptive words such as selfish and foolish, selfish and dishonest, selfish and frightened, selfish and inconsiderate, selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. The big book also tells us on page 71 that some forms of self-will actually block us from our higher power. And we also learn that a self-centered life is in direct conflict with our way of thinking and our way of living. In page 116, it suggests that self-centered people are afflicted with pride, self-pity, vanity, selfishness, and dishonesty. We are challenged in our fourth step to see where we have been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened. And yet we need help to see that. It turns out that the alcohol or drugs really isn't the problem. That self is the problem. The theme of the big book is the process we take by which our higher power is able to rid us of the bondage of self. Selfishness and self-centeredness. That, we think, is the root of our troubles, driven by 100 forms of fear and self-delusion and self-seeking and self-pity. Sometimes we find ourselves hurt, even without being provoked. We make decisions to use based on those hurts. When we think about our troubles are basically our own making. They arise out of ourselves. And the addict is an extreme example of self-will run riot. Though it takes a lot for an addict to finally admit that. And yet, we have to get to the point where we admit it. Where we admit that we need to get rid of this selfishness. If we don't, it will kill us. And yet our higher power makes it possible. It says, and there often seems no way entirely getting rid of self without that higher power's aid. And I personally don't think there's anything more important in recovery than our quest to be set free, little by little, from the bondage of self. At this point, we are quite certain we can't do this on our own. We've tried over and over again, and as long as self is running the show, we can't do it. The third step prayer says, take away my difficulties. And I think this part requires some special attention. First, let me tell you a short story. There was once a great man who had divine power to heal all kinds of illnesses. One day, this great man was walking by a pond and he met a sick guy sitting there, crippled and unable to fend for himself. The sick guy had been sitting there begging for money and complaining a lot for almost 40 years. He was really stuck in self-pity. Maybe it was rightly so. After all, he was pretty incapacitated. So people threw money to this sick guy, and he kept sitting there day by day, begging and complaining and collecting money. Anyway, the great man approached the sick guy and asked him a really important question. He said, "Do you want to get well?" The reason I tell this story is because I believe it's a fair question, and I think we need to answer it. Do you want to change? I'm asking you this morning, do you want to change? Are you truly sick and tired of being sick and tired? Are you ready? A lot of people say, sure, I know that I'm powerless over drugs and alcohol. I know that my life has become unmanageable. But that's as far as they take it. They even make it to the point where they say, yeah, there might be a power out there greater than myself that could restore me to sanity. But nothing further. My friends, recovery will not be forced on us. Step 3 is the part where I say, I am ready to get well. In the third step, it says, take away my difficulties. This causes me to ask myself a few important questions. First of all, do you want your difficulties taken away? Or are they comfortable? Second, is whomever or whatever I'm petitioning, that higher power, able to take away my difficulties? And thirdly, am I willing to risk living today without my comfortable, familiar difficulties? The close of that line says that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of your power, your love, and your way of life. We don't ask our higher power to relieve our difficulties so that we can just go merrily on our way, living our lives selfishly and self-centeredly as we've always done in the past. If nothing changes, then nothing changes. Our higher power knows better than to leave us stuck in our selfish egos. He knows where that will lead us. So it goes back to that question. Do you want to change? And if we do, are you willing to do something about it? As we change, we're going to want to do something about it. We're going to want to help others. Whether it's taking the trash out for a neighbor, helping another person struggling, we're going to want to help. And yet, that self gets in the way. We find ourselves saying, I don't want anyone telling me what to do. How's that working for you? It's never worked in the past, that self-led life. That last line, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of your power, your love, and your way of life. And when I read it, 3 questions come to my mind. Does the higher power I'm praying to indeed have power? Is the higher power I'm praying to capable of feeling and expressing love? And what, pray tell, is my higher power's way of life? I love that word victory. It's such a permanent word, isn't it? I mean, is there anything such as a temporary victory? You either win or you lose. Either you're a victor or you're not. Ask yourself today, do I expect total victory over my addiction? Or do we only pray for partial victory? In the last sentence, may I do your will always. The big book tells us that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of our troubles and that we've been trying to run the show. It's time to stop and let our higher power run the show. I saw a bumper sticker on a car that said, "Don't quit, surrender." And I thought, yeah, that is exactly it. We can try and try and try to quit drinking or using, but it turns out what really works is exactly the opposite of trying harder. What works is letting go, letting our higher power change us, letting our higher power influence our thinking and our actions, and letting our higher power use us to be of service to others. So I ask you this morning, do you want to get well? Would you join me in our serenity prayer? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Guys, I hope you have a good day. I want you to ask yourself that question several times today. Do I want to get well? God bless you.